going to do is explain inlay, and then I'm going to demonstrate it because I think it's better that we actually see it done. So the first slide says for inlay, all we need are three things. We need material, and then we need to route a cavity, and then we need to fill it with that material. In essence, that's all we're doing. So we're going to go over the process of doing these things, and then we're going to start by actually producing some of this stuff. I've drawn a pattern on this which will be put into a piece of wood. I'm going to pass around a piece that has two items. It has a cavity, and it has a piece that's going to be inlaid that is glued with Duco cement to the surface of the wood. And that's what I want you to look at. Here's what's happened to this piece so far. I have decided what I want to do. On this plane, which I'll pass around, it's a user, so don't drop it. You'll see an inlay at the front of the plane that has two different pieces of stone. So, number one, we make material. So what we did was, we made a flower, and then we made a peak, different color, that fits against this one. So this is our flower. These two pieces need to join together. They have to look good. They have to look good in the material because we're going to route this whole thing out. Then these have to be cut into the surface of the wood well and fit there. So you've got two different jobs to do. The first one, and I'll pass this piece around, and you can see the first one is to make that inlay piece, especially if it's one large piece like this, make all those pieces fit together. So here's how we do that. We draw the piece out on paper, set that paper down, put a piece of wax paper over it, and start cutting your pieces out. You can number them if you've got a lot, or if it's just a couple, then you can decide what the materials are and take and place them. Down on the wax paper, in a perfect world, you're going to use, I like to use black rollerball pens and then make photocopies of them, and you're going to cut your line in half. Well, guess what? If the line is cut in half, the pieces will fit together. If you start adding pieces, when you get to something like this where you're stacking 7 pieces of material on top of each other, it starts to grow. That may be okay at this stage where you're cutting out pieces of wood because you haven't done anything else yet. But if it's got to fit inside something, or if it doesn't look right, you've got a chance to adjust it when it's material. That material can be bone, it can be shell like this, it can be metal. This is copper that I bought and cut for this inlay piece that went on the apron of a table. This is copper and gold mother of pearl. The material isn't as important as how you decide to use it and learn to work with it. Bone cut's kind of funny. It's pretty easy to work with. Metal gets hot when you sand it and start to clean it up, so you can loosen glue joints if you get it too warm. Brass is good. You'll want to get soft brass. A lot of places have it. McMaster Carr has a great selection. Basically, I'm using 63 thousandths, which is a 1/16 of an inch. So that's kind of what you want, because guess what? That's like about what the shell is. So if everything's about the same thickness, you can kind of cut the same depth. It always doesn't work that way. You will have pieces of varying height, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I've decided on the drawing that I want to put on this thing, and in this situation, it's some wood and a little bit of inlay of sterling silver at the top. So I draw these pieces on paper, I make several copies, I put the paper down, put wax paper over it, and I overcut these pieces. If you'll see here, I have a shape, but I've cut the paper around the shape. I don't necessarily need to exactly cut this shape and then saw to it. Make it a little bit bigger. This gets glued to your material with low viscosity super glue. So I take it, I've cut up some 1/4 inch white melamine, I put some super glue here. I take my piece of paper with the scalpel, and I pick up that small piece of paper with the scalpel like this, and I put some super glue on here. I dip it in the super glue so it coats the whole thing, and I set it down, use another knife, hold it down for a couple seconds. It's flat against here, and then you'll see this, which is now ready to cut, and I've cut half of this. So pass that around real quick, and then I'll get to cutting that. So the pieces are cut individually. They're laid over the pattern through wax paper till everything lines up. It's a jigsaw puzzle, right? You're putting the pieces together. They got to fit real nice. Varying types of stone or wood or whatever the material is. Once they look good together, then you take the low viscosity super glue. Well, this thing is just sitting there. These pieces of wood are sitting there, and just take and squirt the super glue between these, and you'll see it flow underneath the wax paper all around it. You can use a pin to chase it and glue this whole unit together as one. Or in the case of that flower that I was sending around, that whole flower was done as one piece. That piece is now completed. So I have this thing that now will sit on top of the piece of wood. This flower is all done and ready to go.
Can I ask you a question right here?
Go.
You said as one. It's a bunch of little pieces glued together to become one.
No, they are one now. They're one. This is going to stay together through the whole...
After it's glued together?
Yes, after it's glued together. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the super glue is holding it together. So now my next step is that piece of wood that went around. You'll see it had this small diamond glued to the top. I use Duco cement basically because it's cheese ball and isn't very good. So when I'm done tracing this out on the piece of wood, what'll happen is I can knock it off real easy. I'll get my scalpel, go underneath it, and it'll pop right off and not damage the shell. Okay? Yes, this stuff will chip. You spend a lot of time cutting and filing. You don't want to screw it up at the last minute. So from that point, I have now scribed the pattern, and then what I'll do...
You glue it on there just for the purpose of scribing the pattern?
Yes, because...
And that's done with your scalpel?
Scalpel for straight lines sometimes, but I like to use a pin. And chances are you haven't got all straight lines, so I'll use the pin for two reasons. First of all, I can get close. So if the finger is the pin and this is the stone, I want that right at the joint between the two. Sometimes a scalpel, if the blade is held straight against it, the blade is a little bit away, and a scalpel has more of a tendency to follow the grain. This isn't super sharp, so I'm going to take multiple passes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and kind of lightly score.
Is that pin something you bought or you made?
It came in a set of like X-Acto knives.
Okay.
The metal on this pin is absolutely nothing special. So I lightly scribe, and just like anything else, after the first couple light passes, you can make a little bit deeper pass. Now, a lot of times, I'll take and put a little bit of shellac on the wood, so when I scribe, I obliterate the grain a little bit, and I'm only scratching the surface of some finish. Deft works really good for that. A can of Deft, it goes on quick, it goes on thick, it dries fast, and when you scribe it, you get this great little line. You're cutting plastic, not wood. So it's a different feeling, and with this pin, one or two passes and it's done. Well, your next question is, well, gee, Marco, how do I see that? Great question. Let me show you. What I do is I've developed a high-tech method that I didn't bother bringing with me because it's so simple. I get colored chalk. Basically, I walk down the street and beat up little kids for it. I get colored chalk and take my scalpel and scrape some colored chalk and then rub it in the scribe lines. And a lot of people can probably see this blue line here that is now my pattern that I had glued on top of here. Something this simple, I have oftentimes held it down with my finger and scribed it and cut it in, but unfortunately I don't do simple things because that doesn't cause gray hair. So this is how you see it when you go to cut it. So any questions to this point? We have a pretty design. We've cut it out of shell, wood, metal, or a combination of them, as you saw in that hand plane. I've got shell and wood living together. I've glued it together. Still looks ugly. I don't care what it looks like. I've now taken it and glued it on top of my piece of wood. I've scribed it. I've popped it off, and now I'm going to route it. And then I'm going to install it. Any questions to this point? Cool. Okay.
If those pieces are a little bit rough from cutting or whatever, do you go ahead and polish those out and get the edges nice and smooth before, when you lay it down and then scribe around it?
Yes. Yeah, you want it.
Because it's going to
you want
change
it
size.
fixed. Yeah, exactly. From filing or anything, you want it sized. And you're going to do a lot of work getting the pieces to fit together. That's number one. And then the exterior of the thing has to look good, number two. And you will see, if you look closely at the edge of this, what will happen is, when you're filing that piece on the edge, your file, if it's a little bit like this, and you go to set it in, and then you smooth the top because you left just a little bit proud, it can make a gap. Don't worry about gaps. They fill in, and they start to disappear, you know. If you try to fit this too tightly and pop it back out, you'll chip the corner of the shell. Of course, I've never done that. I just read that in a book. So you don't want to do that. So it has to fit nicely, but you don't want to have to pound it in there, and you don't want it dropping in there either. You know, sort of that mortise and tenon conundrum. This is the thing I've done. This is a throwback from, and if y'all don't know, I come to this business with unfair advantage. I grew up in a family jewelry business. So at 5 years old, I was making brass rings and stuff. So this kind of thing to me is just like a busman's holiday almost. This is just a real small bayonet file that I put a graver handle on, and the graver handle, the flat matches where the file is flat, and it fits in the palm of your hand. And when you're taking and muscling your way around some of this big stuff, or if you're going over the top, it's a lot better than holding that small little handle. It really gives you good control, and a couple of these will make your life a lot easier. So I now come over to cut, and thanks to Paul Marcel, I have the cool new Concepts fret saw to try. And I did. I have a blade on mine, and I grew up using this. This is a nice little German fret saw frame. It's very nice. It's a little bit heavier than this one, but the thing is, because this is so much lighter out here, when I go to turn it, this thing feels like it wants to keep spinning, and this one doesn't. So I have better control. I mean, with the blade in a straight line, they'll both cut about the same, but who's going to cut in a straight line? It's going to be curves, it's going to be real sharp corners, and this thing is really nice. So I'll come over here. Now, for demonstration purposes, I'm up a little bit high, but you want this bird's mouth to be just about shoulder blade height. You want to hold the saw kind of easily in your hand. As a matter of fact, you'll see me sometimes almost with 2 fingers, and you want to make this work exactly like a really good scroll saw. Up and down, no angles, and no tips either way. Nice and simple, nice and slow. I will sometimes take some beeswax and put it on the blade to lubricate it, and that does 2 things. First of all, it captures a lot of the dust, which you do not want to breathe. I usually have a vacuum cleaner set right here and strapped to this with a screen on it, because it'll suck the little pieces up. And here's beeswax. So I'll take and draw the blade through beeswax a little bit. This is what you'll want to be doing, is this. But I'll be up a little bit higher so you can see it. Now, we have a point, and you can do one of 2 things. You can run out past the point, turn around and come back and clean it up later, or what I like to do, and if you saw this piece, I cut past it, and I'm going to come on the other side of it, and then just cut it out and let the point join. Now I can take this piece and break it off because I'm not going to need it again. It's kind of small, and it gives me a chance to start this other one. And if you break a blade, it's because the blades were crappy. It's not your fault. That's why you buy them by the dozen. or by the gross is usually what I end up. This is the same blade that I use in my power scroll saw. This is a 2.0 German or Swiss blade. I don't know. They all seem to cut pretty good, and they do just fine. Everyone's got their preference. So you see, I'm vertical like a scroll saw. And another thing is, with this bird's mouth, I'm always trying to keep a lot of the piece on the wood, and I want my blade as close to this wood as I can be. If stuff starts hanging out, you pull that saw down, you get chatter, you're either going to chip the material if it's shell, or you're going to break the blade. And these things will let you know when you are not exactly vertical, because you'll break the blade instantly. So I'm constantly kind of moving, and you're doing two things. It's just like a bandsaw. You've got feed pressure, and you've got turning speed. So you have to balance the two. Now, because I'm cutting this piece out, and let's say it's a sole piece. This is a leaf that's going to go on a piece with a wooden stem, and this is just a leaf. And I'm going to take it and kind of scratch a line down the middle and fill it with some black to make veining in it later. It doesn't have to fit with anything else. All it's got to do is look good by itself. And if you're going to do something like this, it's a way to start, because you don't have to worry about 5 or 6 pieces looking good together.
Why wouldn't you do it on a power scroll saw?
You know, it gets the shell hot, and it has a tendency to chip a lot more. It bounces around like crazy.
You blow its speed.
Yeah, but you know, I've gotten so used to cutting detail stuff to this like hand. You know, it's funny, even the guys that do this for a living, that do the huge expensive guitars, do it by hand. So I don't know, I mean, you know, it probably worked. I think I tried it once. It was just a train wreck. I mean, even slow, it just caught it and grabbed and really tried to chew it. Okay, now, here's what you do. You get close to the edge, and when it's ready to cut, you watch it real close, because as soon as it releases, it flies, usually about 20 to 25 feet away from where you're cutting. So you want to catch the trajectory of the thing. And as it flies off,
That's why you sweep the floor first, right?
well, yeah, if you have a brain, you do. But if it's like me, it's in the shavings I just made from the day's work. So I now have a piece that's cut. It's a little bit rough, and I've got to smooth it up. This is a great jeweler's tool. These are called parallel pliers. They're smooth jaw. You know, when I was younger, we had a great set of these. These are a little bit lower quality, but they work great. And I'm just going to hold this and use a file to clean this up. And you have to think this file tapers. So you've got to be aware of what angle the file is going to put on your work. So you have to adjust the file correctly, because this angle will leave a gap in your work. So you just want to watch. You want to make sure it's nice and vertical. If you're wondering, just set it down and sight down and look at it. You'll see if it's vertical.
Where's the taper?
It's a rat tail. It starts little at a point and gets bigger.
All right, so you're talking about the taper from one end to the other, not
Yeah.
not across.
No, there's no across. Yeah, it's a round file.
All right.
I have chainsaw files, but I don't use them for stuff like this.
Marco,
Yeah.
on this thing here, which one, is this your show surface, or is that your show surface?
Either one is good. This stuff is consistent all the way through.
All the way through?
Yeah. If it's not, then you look for the better
So
side.
is this gonna get as good of a cut, no matter which
On this one, yes.
you do?
Yeah. On others, there's the Powell Ferro Abalone, which is the most expensive stuff. That's the beautiful rainbow color stuff. It's only got one good side, and you'll know it, and it's really thin as far as the good stuff is concerned. So now I'm going to switch engines here. And old habits die hard. Even at a young age, I used a visor. If you're going to get a visor, I like the ones made by Optivisor, and get the more expensive one with glass lenses. Your eyes will thank you. And this thing is great to use and makes your work a lot easier. And like my father always said, if it looks good under this thing, it'll look great to the naked eye. Okay. I'm going to clean up the outside of this a little bit.
Put your box down.
Where's my file? Oh, here it is. Now, you only want to hold these with pliers. I guess I've spent a lot of years grabbing small pieces between my hands. But now, if this was going to mate to another piece, I'd want to file half the pencil line, or half of my ink line, because if I split both lines in half, then those pieces will go together fine. Do they always? No, but you know how to fix it. And close enough is good enough. If you take a real close look at a lot of my work, I mean, you don't want to get nutty. Don't waste your time here. You got better things to do. So I now have a piece, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to glue it onto the wood, or I'm going to glue it to a bunch of other pieces and set them down. I'm going to trace them. And now it comes time to cut them out. What I've done is Stuart McDonald makes a little router base for a Fordham flex shaft. And I have bits that go onto it, and you'll see a green collar on this bit. What this green collar does is allows me to change bits, drop the bit in, and they all extend the same distance out, so I've got the same depth for every bit that I use. And I've got 32nd and a 16th and 3/32. So use the biggest bit you can, evacuate from the inside out, or at least clean up till the very last edge, okay, till that scribe line that you made. Here's the trick. When you start getting close, the chalk that you put in that little scribe line is going to start coming off, and it'll look like blue powder or red powder, whatever your color is. You'll see that thing start to powder, and you'll know you're there. Okay? This has two important things. This has a light, little LED light that shines down on the work, and with dead batteries, so it's usually brighter. And it has a hookup for an air hose. You can use an aquarium pump, or what I've done is just done a reducer from my main compressor, because I've always got air in the shop, and I can take and turn this and keep the thing blown off and cleared, because you've got to keep the area clear. If you can't see what you're doing, it's no good. And I've still got another light coming down, so plenty of light is going to save you. So, we have the piece. Let's see. Now, Jim has volunteered to be my air compressor. Now this is a router, so the thing is there's climb cutting, there's grab and stuff that are going to happen, so you've got to be careful, okay? So this is, and I think you can kind of see it because we know it's a diamond shape, so we've sort of got a diamond, right? I'm really close. Basically, I want to be about half the diameter of the bit that I'm using away from it, because when I start routing against it, I want it to take the least amount possible. What does that do? It does two things. First of all, it allows me to control it. And the second thing is it's taking a smaller bite, so it's almost like I can shave it. I'm going to reduce the RPMs and make some light passes. And you won't be able to see it, but when you do it, and you know, all you got to do is just take and scribe a line and get some chalk in there. You see the chalk start to powder up, and that's when you know you're there. This around so I can get that. Don't be afraid to turn the piece, and always make it so either you can move around it if it's big, or you can rotate it if it's small. you know, you always want to cut where it's facing you or where you can see it well. If I'm cutting where the, you know, where the line's behind me, it's tough to see. Roughing out, no problem, but on that final pass, you always want to be looking right at it. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this around and I'm going to jump ahead to cleanup. I'm going to show you what it looks like as soon as you're done routing and before you're ready to do final cleanup. So this is what it is, and what I'll do is I'll talk about gluing it, and then I'll talk about finishing it. This comes back around, I'll do the cleanup. Okay, so you've got it routed and you've got it cleaned up. Like I say, we'll go over that in a minute. Gluing happens when the pieces are together, the void has been cut, it fits in well, and you've gotten as close as you want it to be. It's never going to be perfect, and I'll talk about how to fix that in a minute. So, what I like to do is just take a piece of wax paper, fold it up, place it over the top. On this one I use a spring clamp, and I use this as a caul, and left it for a couple hours, and here's what happens. This is what you get. Now this has paper on it and the mother of pearls underneath here. Okay, so this is how it gets glued. It's pretty ugly, it's not real inviting, and this is what you're left with. If you have multiple thicknesses, it's not a problem. All you want to do is get some thick material. Canvas, I've used old towels to place down on top of the pieces of stone with wax paper in between, and then clamp them down real tight, and then that towel's going to take up for the irregularities, glue it, leave it overnight. Even though it's super glue, it takes a while because it's soaking into the pores of the wood and it's got no way to evaporate because you've sealed it with wax paper. It takes a while. So this is now dried overnight and it's ready to go. Before I'm ready to change bandsaw blades and my wood slicers are getting old, I'll take and glue some 80 grit to some 3/4 MDF and then just run it through the bandsaw and cut these strips out. And I use this for initial flattening of the material. Now I talked about stuff like this where this was on a table apron, and this apron is 4 feet long. So there's a big long piece in between, and I used a belt sander. But I used a belt sander very carefully because a little bit of belt sander on this generates heat, softens glue, pops out. Don't ask me how I know. So you want to be careful if you're going to use power tools. And remember that if it's metal, it gets hot. So by hand, it's the safest thing to do. And the stone actually cuts easier than a lot of the wood does. You can take this up to 220 or 320 depending on what you're going to do. If you're using metal, seal it with some shellac so it doesn't oxidize. You always want this stuff on some piece of MDF or something because with the different hardnesses of stone and wood, you're going to get roundovers and bellies and valleys. So always make sure that it's a good hard block. That's why I like these. I don't even like wrapping sandpaper around it for the initial cut. After you get this flat, subsequent grits are just to remove the scratches from the previous. So you're not doing any more leveling at this point. All you're doing is just clean up the 80 grit scratches or the 120 scratches. Now I'm kind of going outside to keep things flat, and then kind of coming back to the middle. Okay, I would have to do a little bit more, but I want you to see this. There's a little bit of blue chalk dust in here, and there's a couple nicks. What I did was, this fit too tight, and I dug in with my knife, and instead of taking a piece out of the shell, which I really didn't want to do, I pried the wood back, and you'll see a couple spots on the side where that happened. Now, it's going to clean up a little bit more sanding, but that's what can sometimes happen when these fit too tight. Again, for demos, it goes kind of fast. So,
You're working on pieces. Could you put that just to the drum center?
you know, I think the heat of it might mess with it. It might, but yeah, for some reason, I just, you know, I like the slowness of it. Did that piece come back that I routed? So, I've gotten, over the years, assortments of little palm carving tools and small chisels and so forth to clean out corners. So, that's what I use. On something that's straight like this, I'd probably end up using, you know, just a bench chisel to kind of clean up the corners. It's not a real problem with straight sides, but the problem with straight sides is everybody knows when they're not straight. Curves, it doesn't matter, but everybody knows when the straight sides aren't. So what I'm going to do is basically hit that line. Do not be afraid to trial fit, even though you don't think you're on your lines. You can take more wood out. It's really a drag to put it back. All right, let's see what we got. So, if I did things right, that would be a tracing of this. So I'll remove this. Sometimes I'll just rub this on something to clean the bottom of it to flatten it up. Some of that cement will sometimes get on it. Plus, when you sand it a little bit, it makes for a better glue surface. Now, if you're doing something like this, and you're doing more than one, you definitely want to mark tops and bottoms or number these things. Don't ask me how I know. After about 20 pieces get cut, and they all kind of look the same. I want...
So you had to want to blow that piece across.
Yeah, that's the only problem. Okay, these are little micro carving tools that are really nice for this stuff. Now, I'm stabbing straight down and then kind of pulling the chisel back. You want to make sure that you've got decent depth everywhere for two reasons. First of all, you don't want to, especially with shell, you don't want to take off a lot of shell because the prettiest shells that have the most vibrant color only have it for a little bit. So if you take off, I mean, even a 64th of an inch sometimes, it gets really boring looking. And the other reason is, if it's not flat and it tips and you put pressure on it when you go to clamp it, you can break the stone. Or so I've read. So let's see how this fits in. Okay, now this would be at the point where if I push down it would go in, I'd never get it out. So that's really close. So that's just going to take a little bit of cleanup. And then what I ought to do is probably send this around so y'all can see what it looks like. One more time. I'll blow it out one more time. All right, see what we get. Okay. We are about there. Now, I'm going to send this around like this because it's close, and I also want you to see that there's a gap at one of the corners. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because for some reason when you glue this stuff up with a good gin clear adhesive and everything's all cleaned up and done, the little spots kind of disappear. So I would live with that the way it looks. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Now, don't forget, I'm cleaning up the wood. And if your edges are nice, you can raise the bridge or lower the water. You can take your file and make a couple passes on the piece of stone too, and then drop it in. So don't limit yourself to just, oh, I got to get this wood right, and you know, you got the corners all clean and everything's perfect, and it just doesn't. This thing, I could force it in there, but I don't want to because number one, never get it out, and two, I'd break it if I did. So what I'd probably do is make a couple passes with the file, and that would just drop right in.
You use the term gin clear glue?
Yeah.
What's that? Does it come in a bottle?
Yeah. You know, I use this real low viscosity super glue.
All right. Is that what you call gin clear glue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just with drinking days.
Right.
Yeah. It's just.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do after I get this installed is drink gin, clear gin. So I can take this down a little bit more. Any questions while I'm cleaning this up?
What do you think Duco cement?
You know, it's a household cement that has been around for a lot of years, and it has like nominal shear strength, and that's why I use it for this, because you can just split it real.
Where do you buy it?
Years.
Like hardware store stuff. It's just really like grocery stores have it. Yeah, it's not great stuff, so it's perfect for what we need.
What about the gin clear glue? Where do you buy that?
This I got at Rockler. It's called Stickfast. Rockler makes it, and for some reason, even in the shop in the summer, this stuff hasn't gone bad, which is nice.
What do you used to put the 60 grit on the MDF? Contact adhesive?
Yeah, but Super 77, the real good 3M spray adhesive. Yeah.
The thin coat so you don't get any bubbles in it?
Yeah, it's great stuff. This is a selection, I'm sure a lot of it's gone, I've added more to it over the years, of shell from a company called DePaul Supply. It's luthiersupply.com, and for the price of $85, they fill this with all sorts of great shell. And what that did for me when I was experimenting was it told me that, you know, white mother of pearl is really cool, and Palo Ferro abalone is really cool, but it's expensive. It's like cocaine expensive. They sell it by the gram. You feel like you're an international like fugitive when you buy this stuff. But they do a great job, and this guy Andy that owns the company will probably answer the phone when you call. Here's a perfect example of good side and bad side. This has got kind of gray, and if you turn it around, it's just really pretty and bright everywhere. And the real pretty and bright, especially on this, doesn't go a long way. It's kind of boring in the middle, and it kind of gets nice on the other side.
So that's not the stuff you could pick up on the beach if you were walking?
Oh, sure, some of it is, but it takes them like a ton to get a pound. It's nutty what, you know, like they throw away so much of it. But yeah, it's the same stuff. Absolutely. I don't want to cut it, but yeah, you're more than welcome to. So yeah, this is great. The brass is easy to find. McMaster Carr has tons of that stuff, the soft naval brass.
Is that all got the same thickness?
About a 16th. Yeah, give or take. You know, there's going to be variances. I very seldom change the adjustment of the router once I'm going on doing stone or metal work. It's pretty consistent.
The supplier of that material pretty much ensures it's going to be the same thickness.
Yes.
You were chasing it down on the beach, all bets are off.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, you know, you speak about thickness of material. In my slide presentation, I had a beautiful photograph of a frame that I made using this turquoise. And this is turquoise. It's drilled all the way through for a necklace. And what I did was kind of straightened up the sides, kind of left it a natural edge. So I got the sides straight, and then just took it on some 80 grit and flattened it out so I knew what the top looked like and the bottom. So now I've got a flat surface. So that flat surface is what I'll cut to, and then I take and trace that and inlay this. Now obviously this is a lot thicker than the other stuff. Just set it deeper, cut this, but then I did sterling and ebony inlay on either side of it in a chevron pattern, and the sterling is 63,000, so it's back to a 16th for that. No big deal. Reset the depth of the router, cut that stuff and inlay it. And these were all assembled, sitting on a sheet of wax paper, glued together, and then set down on top of the picture frame, and then routed, and then scribed and routed in.
And you glue it together with super glue, right?
Yeah, yeah. If it breaks apart, I don't worry about it. When I'm putting it in and stuff, once I've got it cut up, I don't care. Once I've got it traced, I don't care if it breaks apart.
Right.
Because a lot of times it's easier to go back in separately, because you have to clean up. Sometimes there's like glue flash on the glue, because when you glue it to the wax paper, it kind of spreads out, and you might have to rub it on some 80 grit, and I'll take my knife and clean up the edge, and that'll be the difference between a good fit and a bad fit sometimes. Yeah, and this is just made up turquoise. This is real cheap stuff, and it looks great, especially in a piece of furniture. You know, it's seen at a distance, but like I said, I grew up in the jewelry business, and this would be really expensive turquoise if it was real, and it looks good. So yeah, you can get it. There's a place at 7th Street just south of Camelback. It's a bead place. It's right by Photo Forum. I don't know the name of the bead place, but it's right south of it. It's southwest corner, 7th Street and Camelback, and they just all sorts of beads and stones and stuff that you can use for inlay. Dirt cheap.
So you use the super glue, you glue your pieces together like a jigsaw that you finished.
Mhm.
And then how do you glue that on top of the wood so you can trace it? How do you,
I use this Duco cement.
that's,
Yeah, that's what the Duco's for, because it'll come off easy. And then I use super glue again. And what I'll do is I'll actually take the piece and put it in the wood and then just squirt super glue on it. It gets around underneath. That low viscosity stuff really finds its way around.
It whips itself in there.
It will. And the problem is if you put the super glue in and then try to press the piece in and it splashes, it can get on your face, or so I've read. So you don't want to do that.
You can even get on your glasses.
Oh, that'd be pretty stupid.
what do you do with the thumbprint?
It cost you $47.50 at Costco to get a new lens. Yeah. Any more questions?
How do you get your thumb off after you've pushed it in?
Well, no, you know,
Andy
it's the personal part of furniture making. You know, they have your DNA in their their dinner hutch. Yeah, I've done that. But yeah, start out with a square piece. Start out with some brass and some wood. You can go to Home Depot and get this brass tomorrow, or any of the hobby stores. And you take it and cut it. So you've taught yourself cutting. You clean it up. You route it. You put it in, and you smooth it up. And it's a really easy way to learn inlay. You know. And then everything's easier than this: shell and wood. So this is the tough stuff. Breaks
Where do you
plates.
get that little base?
I made that. Oh, this base?
Yeah.
Stuart McDonald. I steal a lot of tricks from luthiers because they're kind of like jewelers in wood. So I use a lot of stuff from them. So Stuart McDonald, stumac.com.
Yeah.
You're probably going to say that a Dremel rotor tool with a router base isn't going to be quite up to.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of guys use those. Yeah,
I'm just
they're
gonna
great.
ask that same
Stumac.
question.
Yeah,
Stumac makes that for a Dremel.
Yeah, they make that base for a Dremel. Absolutely. Look,
Yeah.
it's a router. All it's got to do is not move up and down and have enough guts to cut through wood, and pretty much everything does.
So you don't need the high speed for this application.
I like low speed better because you have more control. Carbide bits are important, and then Stuart McDonald sells those. Yeah, because usually you're cutting through an ebony fingerboard or something, and you want a better bit. But the carbide bit leaves a clean finish, and it just lasts forever.
So on the guitar, expensive guitars, they're just using super glue for those inlays?
Shh, don't tell anybody. I sometimes use a glue called 330. It's available through jewelry supply places. We use them for doing what we call triplets, where you would take 3 stones and glue them on top of each other and then make a cabochon out of them. That's a good glue, but it's actually kind of overkill for furniture.
I got a Les Paul in one of my inlays, you can just kind of see it making a gap on there from, I guess, wearing on it.
Well, the wood moves, the stone doesn't.
It's good.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
For the Dremel.
Yeah. Drop a little super glue in there and smooth it up, you'll never know it.
You know, point of interest, I've not done the inlay, but stuff for furniture and other artwork and stuff like that, if you watch the advertising, once a year down in Tucson, they have the Rock and Mineral Show
Yeah,
down
much
there.
my old buddies are there.
And
I
they
go see
come
them.
from all over the world to sell their stuff down there, and you can buy some really neat stuff down there pretty cheap.
Yep.
I mean, even the good stuff.
Yeah.
Even the good stuff you can buy reasonable.
Yeah, they sell by the pound.
Yeah.
it's
If
great.
you don't feel like going to Tucson, you can go to Quartzsite.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do Quartzsite in January, Tucson in February. Yeah, I've got a good friend that I went to school with,
Yeah.
jewelry school with, that'll be there. There's no reason you shouldn't use real stone because it's just really cheap. I'm done.
Thank you, Marco.
Wow, thank you, Marco, that was great.